We will give you our best and worst of the weekend coming up in 20 minutes. 877-3DP Show. Spent a little bit of time in the first hour of the program talking about the penalties levied against Michigan. We'll talk to Ross Dellenger of Yahoo Sports about that. Also, the possibility of a 24 or 28 team college football playoff that the Big Ten is proposing. Let's bring in Ross, who joins us now. How would you summarize the NCAA's punishment of Michigan football?
Ooh, it's a good question, Dan. I would summarize it as, uh, I guess it depends on who you ask, Dan. If you ask Michigan people, right, they say it was too hard and the penalties financially are too stiff, and that's probably a point of why they're appealing, right? If you ask everybody else in college football and college sports, they'll say it was way, way too light, right? The NCAA should have given Michigan a postseason ban, and they should have vacated wins in championships, and they should have added more suspension and penalties to the current head football coach, Sharon Moore. I think what the NCAA did, and they're starting to move away from the vacated wins, right? They're starting to move away from postseason bans because it penalizes sort of innocent players that are currently on the team and future players that will be on the team. So they're kind of moving away from that. So they're just substituting these financial penalties, for the postseason ban. And if you look at the full penalties, the cumulative penalties, financial penalties, it's going to be over $30 million and probably as much as $37 million. I mean, that is a historic penalty that you just never seen anything like it. And I know it's easy to sort of roll your eyes at they have a lot of money and they can pay it. We're in an age of athlete compensation where everybody's going to be paying $20 million to their athletes starting this year. So I don't think it's anything necessarily to roll the eyes at. I think it was a pretty significant penalty, but it's probably not what most people believed that they deserved. And I'll say one more thing about that, Dan, is that if the NCAA, which was tipped off in October 2023, in the middle of that season, that 2023 season was tipped off to this sign stealing, took a few days to start to really vet it, realized it was real, and then alerted the Big Ten, who then suspended Jim Harbaugh those 3 games. If that doesn't happen and they don't suspend and the Big Ten doesn't decide to suspend Jim Harbaugh, the NCAA doesn't alert the Big Ten to this, Michigan probably does get vacated wins and maybe even gets a postseason ban.
Wait, explain why.
I think the fact that you sort of dealt with it immediately during that season. I think there's a thought that the 3 games that the head coach was suspended in you remember, he was suspended, I think, 2 or 3 games earlier that season too for a separate investigation. The fact that they immediately took action, and I think Charlie Baker said this after they won the championship, is that you can't argue that they won it sort of fair and square, something like that. And part of the reason he said that is because of that 3-game suspension for Jim Harbaugh. It's like we dealt with it then, right? We dealt with it there. And I think they took that, the Committee on Infractions took that under consideration. And if that wouldn't have happened, I just have a belief that that championship would have been in jeopardy of being vacated.
If I asked Jim Harbaugh, did you cheat? Or not him. If I ask him, did Michigan cheat? What do you think his answer would be? If I just said yes or no, did Michigan cheat?
I can't imagine Jim Harbaugh acknowledging in any way that the University of Michigan cheated, or that he cheated, or that anybody on his staff cheated. Michigan, as well as Jim Harbaugh, I'm sure, continues to contend that they really received not much of a advantage from the sign stealing and the advanced scouting, and that it shouldn't have been illegal, and that it should be legal to go scout your opponents. And many times, Michigan administrators and coaches have come to me and said, "Look, years ago, this this rule was almost changed to permit schools to do it, but it's sort of a cost containment issue. And so they continue to contend that they didn't get any advantage. And again, everybody else, right, in college sports will tell you they did get an advantage. And I think the Committee on Infractions thought they did get an advantage. And if we were in any other era, Dan, before this sort of rev share type of era, Michigan would have received a postseason ban almost certainly, and they would have had scholarship reductions. But this is sort of a new world. And so they decided not to do that and go instead with the financial penalties.
Okay, Jim Harbaugh has a 10-year show cause, which means he can't come back and coach in college. Correct? If it's now that seems like a really harsh punishment for him if he goes back, but he's not going back. My question though would be if he was still there, what would his punishment be? If this is his punishment and he's not there, Ross.
Yeah, Norman Bay, who's the chief, he was like the chairman, I think, of the Committee on Infractions. He gave a press conference last week after the ruling, and he was asked exactly that. Basically, he was asked what would have happened if Jim Harbaugh was still the head coach. What would the penalties have been? And there was like literally, Dan, there was like an 8-second pause, and he just stared at the camera, and you could see the wheels turning. Like, oh boy, what do I say here? Finally, he really sort of danced around the question of, it's a hypothetical. We're not going to get into that, but fairly clearly, the penalties would have been a lot more severe if Jim Harbaugh was Michigan's coach. There's no doubt about it that it would have been a lot more severe. I mean, I say that they have sort of stopped doing the postseason ban. But if Jim Harbaugh was still coach at Michigan, if there wasn't going to be a postseason ban, there was going to be some kind of like season worth of suspensions for him.
Talking to Ross Dellenger, Yahoo Sports senior college football reporter. I saw the story floated by the Big Ten, or the Big Ten has an idea for playoff expansion, 24 or 28 teams, and we're looking at the Big Ten and the SEC, that they would get half the field, and then you would have the ACC and Big 12. They get 5 bids, and then you would have 2 automatic bids for the non-Power 4 conferences and 2 at-large teams. So that escalated quickly. That we're talking about this. Now I know we're headed towards this. Why? How long is it going to take to get there?
I think it's still going to take long, and I think this idea was just an idea, and is just an idea, right? It was, somebody kind of described it to me. I thought it was pretty accurate. Back of the napkin stuff, like this. It really is like this is very, very preliminary. So this was we're a week ago. So last Monday, I think, or last Tuesday. The Big Ten had a meeting with its athletic administrators and kind of just sort of presented this. Hey, what do you think? And everybody sort of gave it the thumbs up, right? And then they sent it to the SEC early last week, and there was a preliminary, the first call between Big Ten Commissioner Tony Petitti and SEC Commissioner Greg Sankey Friday about it, and it was just sort of a going through it. What do we think of this? I think the Big Ten is sort of like trying to get a feel for where the SEC is, and there's really been no answer there from the SEC. But this week there could be some kind of answer. The SEC athletic directors meet for a regularly scheduled meeting this week, and so I'm guessing it will come up. But Dan, this is so preliminary. Like when I heard about it Thursday, I decided that I wouldn't write about it because it was so preliminary. ESPN did write about it on Saturday, which forced all of us to write about it. But I went to somebody who was very involved in the process about like, hey, I'm writing something. They're like, there's nothing to write. This is a non-story. It's just starting. We haven't even gotten to the first step of it. And they are right. I mean, this is very preliminary. So I think we're still a ways away. But Dan, I think we always knew when college football went from 2 to 4, and certainly when it went from 4 to 12, we knew this was inevitably it was going to go to at least 16. And so I think that's still where the focus is trying to get this thing to 16. But there's a deadline, December 1, where they have to make a decision on next year's playoff. Obviously, this year's is 12, and that's all set. We're trying to decide on next year, and then and then the next 5 years, right? The new kind of 6-year extension that starts next year. So they have till December 1. I have a feeling next year's playoff will be where it is this year. It certainly will not be 24 or 28 teams, right? This is not happening within a year.
Great to talk to you. Thanks for joining us.
No problem. Thank you.
Ross Dellenger, Yahoo Sports senior college football writer. Yeah, it's one of those things where this story comes out and then your bosses say, why aren't we covering this? Well, I'm told that it's not a story. Well, ESPN's reporting it. Okay, but still, it's not a story. All right, we still have to cover it. And then all of a sudden, you're adding credibility to the ESPN report of 24 to 28. I just think we need to slow down. But everybody realizes how much money is there. And all of these leagues have expansion. Nobody's reducing, they're adding. Baseball's talking about adding teams. Baseball's talking about realignment. And they're trying to cut down on the travel, the wear and tear. You might see the Mets and the Yankees and the Red Sox and the Phillies all in the same division.